What's up guys, it's my geography channel again, and for this video, it's actually gonna be about Uganda. I'm sorry I haven't posted, I've just been a little busy with stuff. Anyway, this is about Uganda, so let's start. Uganda is a country in East Africa. It's actually it's actually landlocked in East Africa, and it's bordering the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or sometimes called the DRC, to the west, South Sudan to the north, Kenya to the east, Rwanda to the southwest, and Tanzania to the south. And Tanzania is bordered by Uganda by Lake Victoria and its little smidge of land. The capital and largest city is Kampala, and it sits in southern Uganda. And Kampala actually sits right on Lake Victoria, the biggest lake in Africa. And then the second largest city being Nanasta, and the third being Kira. Kampala is the biggest and the most populated city, with a total of 1,500,000 people in the city, just in this tiny city. Kampala is the biggest urban city in the country, and Lira is actually a little town in northern central Uganda. It's very popular, and there's actually there used to not be a university here now, but now there is. Now we're going to talk about its geography. Uganda is obviously a country in Eastern Africa, almost in Central Africa. It borders Lake Victoria to the south, Lake Albert to the west, and this little lake with the border with the DRC, Lake Edward, to the west also. Uganda might be landlocked, but their water source is pretty good if you ask me. They have Lake Albert, they have Lake Edward, they have Lake Victoria, and don't forget, and let me tell you guys something you probably don't know. All the people from Uganda that are watching this video, you guys already know, but most people don't know this. But if you don't know that Uganda actually has the Nile River, you're probably thinking, Uganda? No, why would they have the Nile River? Well, most people don't know this, but Uganda is the country that even makes the Nile River, because the Nile River starts from Lake Victoria. Look, I'll show you. See, it says Victoria Nile, and if you don't know what that means, in Uganda, they call their Nile River Victoria Nile. The reason it's called Victoria Nile is because the Nile River is flowing from a lake called Lake Victoria, so Uganda, they call it the Victoria Nile River. And the Nile River actually starts from Uganda. It doesn't start from Egypt, because why it doesn't start from Egypt is because how could Egypt just make a big hole starting from the Mediterranean Sea going all the way down? No, it wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't make any sense if it would start from Egypt anyway. The only reason is people only hear the Nile River. Like, when you hear the Nile River, the first thing that comes to mind is Egypt, because you know that Egypt is the only country. You think Egypt is the only country that has the Nile River, but no. Sudan has the Nile. Even Ethiopia has the Nile. They don't have the White Nile, but they have the Blue Nile. South Sudan has the White Nile River, and Uganda has the White Nile River too. Now let me show you. The White Nile, the Victoria Nile, is a river in southern Uganda, flowing right here, flowing through a little very small city, through the city called Jinja. It flows through it, and it also flows through Ninjur, and then it makes its way up north. And then eventually it goes into its water connects with Lake Koga, and then we go up north. We go up north, and then eventually the Victoria Nile changes its name to the White Nile, and then the White Nile then gets its name. It gets with the border with South Sudan. We're in the Uganda-South Sudanese border, and this town is called Nimule. Nimule is a town in South Sudan, right near the border with Uganda by the White Nile River. So okay, you can even tell you that. It's like you could call it a little border town. Okay, now we follow the Nile up. And eventually then we find the Nile right here. The Nile is the largest river in South Sudan. And South Sudan is a good growing country, so they really need the Nile. And the Nile River passed through the country's capital, Juba, and then it makes its way up Sudan. Eventually it hits Ethiopia, it hits Egypt, and then it goes into the Nile River. And it goes into Egypt, and it enters into the Mediterranean Sea, and eventually the rest of the world, basically. So yeah, if you don't know that Uganda does have the Nile River, but there's people saying that the Nile River goes into 11 countries. Like the people of the Americans think that the Nile goes into the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Central African Republic, and then yeah. But that's wrong, cuz how I know it's wrong is because look, Lake Victoria is right here, and Rwanda is like a little, well, not south, but Rwanda is west of Lake Victoria. So why would the water of Lake Victoria, why would the White Nile River just go into Rwanda? Like, that's stupid. What's the point of that? And Tanzania. I know Tanzania shares Lake Victoria, but the Nile River in Uganda goes up north of Uganda. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't go south, what Tanzania is. It goes up north of Uganda. I know it looks like the river connects with Kenya, but it doesn't connect with river. You might see this river and you might think this is the Nile River, but it's not the Nile. It's just a different river. Like, let's see what it's called. See, it's called the Kalem River. It's not the Nile River. People just think that because the Nile, on maps, the Nile in Uganda looks close, but it's not. So that's how I know it doesn't go into Tanzania. And how I know it doesn't go into Kenya, because here is Lake Kolga and Lake Koljuri. The Nile River goes past through Jinja, going north of Uganda, and then it goes east of the country. So no, it doesn't go into Kenya. And it definitely doesn't go into Lake Turkana. Now, how I know it doesn't go into the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This one is the most confusing. So you see this river, right? This is the Victoria Nile. And if you don't know what that means, like I just said, it means the Nile River. Now, if you go follow the Victoria Nile, you can actually see that it enters Lake Albert. And if you don't know, Lake Albert is a lake in Uganda, with the border with the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda. They both share the lake. As you can see, the river flows into the lake, but let me show you the real reason why it doesn't go into the DRC. Because when the river goes into the lake, that's where it stops. It doesn't go anywhere else. It flows into the lake, and that's it. None of the river water goes into the DRC. It might be mixed up, but the DRC does not have the Nile. So that's how they don't have the Nile. Ethiopia, let me tell you how they have the Nile. So in Sudan, the Nile goes up north. The Blue Nile River goes into Ethiopia, passing through Bahidar. And then here's the Blue Nile River. It goes into Lake Tana and flows back out. And it doesn't go into Central African Republic, because if it's already passing through Juba, what's the point of it going west of South Sudan? Because that's just further. And then if Africa connected on all of its rivers, it would just be really, really weird. So it doesn't go into Central African Republic. And I don't really need to explain, because if it doesn't even go into Central African Republic, what makes you think that it goes into Chad? And Eritrea, it also doesn't go into Eritrea either, because have you guys ever heard of the Barka River? Some of you have, some of you haven't. And have you guys, and the Mereb River? This is the real important. The Mereb River, the Setit River, the Mereb River is a river with the border with Eritrea, Ethiopia, and South Sudan. I mean, not South Sudan, Sudan. It's really in Sudan, but it connects with Eritrea and Ethiopia. It's like a border river between Eritrea and Ethiopia. It flows all the way up. And then eventually the Marab River goes into Sudan, and then the Marab River connects with the Nile River. Look, this is in Sudan. In Sudan, they call the river the Atbara River, because why would they name it Marab in their own country? That's a little weird. So this is the Marab River, but we're in Sudan, so it's called Ahbara, but it's really the Marab River. So the Ahbara connects with the Nile River. So you see, the Marab River isn't named Nile. Sometimes it's called the Black Nile River in Sudan, but that's just what they mean, but it's not true. So yeah, Eritrea, they don't have the Nile River. That's why a lot of people think Eritrea has the Nile, but we don't have the Nile. But they just make it look like it's so clear. It would be nice if we did, but we already have good rivers. We have the Ansaba River, the Gashbarka River, and we have so many other good rivers too. And the border with Eritrea and Ethiopia, okay, we own the Marab River. Anyway, back to Uganda. Uganda is a landlocked country because it doesn't have any access to any ocean or any sea like its neighboring countries Tanzania and Kenya. But don't think that just because it's landlocked, it doesn't have water source. Uganda is a good country because it actually has good water source. It has Lake Victoria to the south, Lake Albert, Lake Edward, and also, like I said before, it has Lake Kyoga and Lake Kojuari and Lake Kawanazia. Uganda, they have so many rivers and lakes, so don't think just because they're landlocked that they don't have much. They're very good. Kampala is the only biggest urban city in the whole entire country. Now, we're going to show you the flag of Uganda. Let me show you. So let's zoom in. Here, the flag of Uganda is a flag with the major colors black, yellow, red, and black. And then they have a little white circle in the middle with a bird on it. I think it's really cool. This is the flag of Uganda, and I think the bird is honestly very cool. Now we're going to talk about some borders. So some people in Uganda think Uganda, it doesn't have any trouble. Uganda, they don't have any problems with any borders because they have good borders. Well, we're going to talk about land because sometimes people from different countries like Egypt and Sudan, for example, let me tell you. This is the Halib Triangle. If you see it, let me show you. You see this little piece of land? It looks like it belongs to Egypt, right? Wrong. It belongs to Sudan. And you see this little trapezoid kind of? This is called Bir Tawil. And Bir Tawil looks like it's in Sudan, right? Wrong. It's in Egypt. Let me tell you how this happened really quick. The way it happened is when UK colonized Egypt and Sudan, they were making the borderline and they were trying to make it they were just gonna make it really straight, honestly, just like that. But then I don't know what happened. Someone just wanted to change the border. They made a dumb mistake and then they remade the border. I don't know why, but they made a dumb mistake and remake the border. So this part belonged to Sudan and this part belonged to Egypt. But then I don't know what happened. And then after Egypt and Sudan were fighting because they were both fighting for the Halib Triangle. Even though it looks like it's in Egypt, it belonged to Sudan, but it also belonged to Egypt too. Now in 2023, Egypt and Sudan made an agreement that they both own the triangle. But back then, Sudan and Egypt were going after this triangle because it was the biggest, that triangle was a big piece of land. So Egypt and Sudan were fighting for it. They didn't care about Bir Tawil because it was small. And Sudan's already a pretty big country, so they don't honestly care if Egypt has Bir Tawil. But Sudan, for some reason, cared about this big piece of land. So they've been fighting, and then now they both own this piece, and they both own Bir Tawil too. But I think Sudan controls Bir Tawil the most. I mean, I think Sudan owns the Halib Triangle more. I think Egypt owns Bir Tawil more. Look, Egypt and Sudan even made a city called Halib. Halib is a town on the Red Sea in the Halib Triangle, which is a dispute between Egypt and Sudan. Okay, this is the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Bye.